What's wrong with Elon Musk? I want to look at this non-politically today. We're not going to be concerning ourselves with this politics. This isn't a political analysis. Remember, even Steve Bannon, who is a massive Trump ally, is very concerned about Elon Musk and has a lot of criticisms to offer about the wealth and power that Elon has garnered to himself and now uses it supposedly for the President of the United States, but also may have his own agenda in mind. So, welcome to Philosophy All Along. What I want to look at today is how the most powerful man in the world, by virtue of his wealth and his connection to the President of the United States, seems to be becoming increasingly erratic, increasingly narcissistic, and increasingly focused on his ability to garner power to himself, that his massive amount of wealth might be causing him to act in more narcissistic ways that, as he interacts with our society, causes him to violently respond to the rest of us when we're critical of him. Let's look at what I'm talking about here. Well, number one, we have to consider the complete difference between however much wealth we might be able to earn and how much wealth he happens to have. So Elon Musk has over $400 billion. Let's look at his wealth like this. A million is 1/1000th of a billion, right? It takes 1,000 millions to get to a billion. You can have $999 million and still not have $1 billion. Well, let's say, and this is not even remotely close to the case, but let's say I made $100,000 a year, right? Well, if I make $100,000 a year and save all of it, never spend a single dollar, if I make $100,000 a year after 10 years, I then have $1 million. Great, okay. At that same earning rate, how long would it take me to get to $1 billion? Well, since a million is 1/1000th of a billion, we already know it's more than 1,000 years, but that's not enough, right? Because it took us 10 years to get to the million in the first place. So it's 10 times 1,000. So whilst it might take me 10 years to get to $1 million, if I'm earning $100,000 a year, it literally takes me 10,000 years at that same earnings rate to get to $1 billion. So what you start to realize is that there's a very, very, very different earning aspect to this. You can't go to work as a person who does normal work and ever earn $1 billion over the course of your lifetime. You won't have $1 billion come through your account. Whereas for many Americans, they will have, over the course of their lifetimes, $1 million come through their account. Not all at once, but over the course of 50 or 60 years worth of work. The other way to think about it is to simply imagine that you had, say, some sort of equivalency. So let's say instead of having $400 billion, let's say I just happen to have $400,000, right? Again, it's an insane amount of money, not money I will ever have, but okay, let's say I have $400,000 and one of those dollars is in my pocket and falls out. How concerned am I now? Well, probably not very, right? Because I have $400,000. If I lose one of them, what's the big deal? Well, Elon Musk has 400,000 millions, right? He has $1 billion, which means he has 400,000 millions. So what does it matter to him if he loses $1 million? It's proportionally equivalent to my losing the $1. It's not a big deal. So the way that I might think of $1 if I had 400,000 of them is the way that he thinks of a million. Think about what's 10 million when you have 400,000 millions? What's 100 million when you have 400,000 millions, right? You have to start spending more money than most countries have access to for him to start being concerned about losing wealth. In other words, Elon Musk has more money than most countries' GDPs. Okay, so with that in mind, kind of a sense of how much money the man actually has, well, now all we have to do is kind of ask ourselves, well, how do things like money interact with things like power? Now, this is all stuff you know, and you don't need me to go into the nitty-gritty of it. But one thing I do think that's interesting is that there's theorists that don't think of money as something that you have. They think actually as money as something that causes you to have like a IOU in relevance to your society. So in other words, if you have money in your pocket, it really isn't a thing, right? Especially if it's conceptual, like in the bank or something like that. It's not a thing that you have so much as it's a thing that you can use to get other people to give you stuff. So the way to think about money is kind of a language of debt, right? IOUs, right? You're holding that money and you get to give it to other people, and then they have to give you goods and services. It's almost as if you're carrying around a demand, right? If you have $1, you can demand $1 worth of goods and services. If you have $10, you can demand $10 worth of goods and services. If you have $100, you can demand $100 worth of goods and services. And in many cases, people actually really do kind of have to give it to you. Like if they're at a store and they're following certain non-discriminatory laws and things like that, you go in there and you hand them the money and they're supposed to give you that thing. So money isn't just, oh, I have this thing. It is your ability to make demands on the rest of your society. So you can look at your bank account and go, okay, well, I have $500 in my bank account. So I guess I have about $500 worth of demand, $500 that the rest of society owes me of goods and services. Well, Elon Musk has $400 billion worth of demand that he can place on society. In other words, from the perspective of what he can do with his money and the way that it interacts with the economy, he has $400 billion of goods and services that we owe him. That's more goods and services than most countries, again, have in the world in terms of like GDP. So the very realization that he has so much money that he could bankrupt the United States if he demanded us all that we pay him with everything that we own, with every dollar that we have in terms of stuff and goods and services. If he called out that debt, the country would go pretty close to broke, right? It would be decimating. So what does that translate to in my analysis? It translates into a lot of power. In other words, he has, from the perspective of his wealth, the ability to make this massive demand. We owe him a lot of goods and services. Okay. So the studies on this, though, show that people, even if they haven't had to do something specifically special to earn a title, will come to believe that they deserve it. So one of those studies was done back in like 1986. And what they did was they basically showed people, like, we're pulling like names out of hats here, right? They showed them how random the process was and then gave them a set of like 3 labels that it was like, okay, you're a worker, you're a supervisor, right? So on and so forth. So, but everyone knew that this wasn't, you're being picked for this position. It was just totally random handing out. Well, what the study showed was not only did people act out the roles that they got when they were assigned kind of a task associated with it, like, oh, okay, well, I'm a worker, I'm a supervisor, that the supervisors would view themselves as needing to take on the supervisory aspect of that, but they would also come to believe that they had leadership qualities that made them deserving of it. In other words, people started to tell themselves narratives and report that they did in fact actually deserve the title that they saw was randomly doled out. So what the studies show is people come to believe that they deserve the power positions they have, even when the power positions are made up and even when they know that they are randomly chosen. In other words, the converse of this is that the other people didn't get that position, didn't get that title because they don't deserve it. They're not as good as you, right? And so what that informs is something called just world theory. So this isn't just an application out to the world. This is something that has a psychological quality to it, which is the idea that people start to believe that the world, in fact, is actually just, that the hierarchies and the disparities between us are fair, that the world somehow, that the universe itself is working itself out in a way in which, yes, the people who have the power deserve that power, and then the people who don't have it. It's also an individual psychological belief set where not only do people who have power come to believe, well, I must be special, I must have done something to deserve it, and the people who don't have it, they don't deserve it. But also the people who don't have it, but people start to believe that when bad things happen to them, they must have done something to earn it, that they are being punished somehow, that the universe is punishing them, God is punishing them, that they've done something, that there's some consequences for it that are deserving. So this explains a lot of why we tend to look at people in prisons and be like, well, you chose something to be there, even though almost every single person here listening to this right now has driven poorly enough, at least one time in their life, to warrant a felony, right? And so we've just all been lucky that we haven't gotten caught. That person gets caught and we're like, well, you made those choices, Buster. You deserve to be there. Well, a lot of that is explained kind of through that just world theoretical and psychological paradigm where people think that they deserve to have what they have. Well, look at Elon Musk. So now what we realize is not only someone who has an amount of money and wealth and power that we can never approach, right? but that money itself acts as a kind of power that he has in terms of demands that he can make, that society owes him something. We have study after study that suggests that people, even when they haven't done something to earn it, will come to believe that they deserve the power superiority positions that they have, and that the people who don't have it deserve to be in that lower position. And notice, of course, it's not like Elon Musk has done nothing to earn what he has, right? The guy works very hard. He's very smart. A lot of people like he's a genius, right? So he has done things to earn it. But that makes it even worse. So this idea that he has earned it all by himself cannot in fact be true. But our psychology will tell us that it's true, that I must be special, right? I deserve to be captain of the class. And in his case, kind of captain of the world, right? That he knows better than all of the rest of us, and he wouldn't be in this position if he didn't know better, right? So it becomes a cyclical reasoning problem where he knows better. Why? Because he's in the position that he's in, and he wouldn't be in the position he's in if he didn't know what all of us actually need and deserve. So, but that leads to one final study that I want to talk with you about that you definitely already heard of, that is very concerning in this regard, and it's the Stanford prison experiment, right? The Stanford prison experiment, as you know, basically they took a classroom full of people. They said, we're going to divide you in half completely randomly. You're the prisoners, you're the prison guards. Okay, so those are your roles. Act accordingly. We're going to go to a prison, and you're going to live that out. Well, what they found over a very short course, like within the course of a week, was that the prison guards started showing symptoms of abuse against the prisoners, at least emotionally, right? That there started to become this strong disparity in terms of the prison guards really started to believe that they deserved to be the prison guards, that there was something special about them, that the prisoners were somehow inferior and deserving of being treated as prisoners. But this was just a classroom, right? Like this was just randomly chosen. And the prisoners were starting to show symptoms that they also believed that they somehow deserved to be in this position. It was so bad that they had to stop the experiment, because even the experimenter, the person who was in charge of it, was starting to get sucked into it, into this belief that maybe the prisoners deserved to be in the positioning that they were in. And it was actually his girlfriend at the time was like, okay, listen, bro, you have to stop this. Well, when the study was investigated further, when they, did some additional stuff before, we've kind of said you can't do that kind of study anymore, was they tried doing studies where they took the former prisoners and put them in the position of being the prison guards. But they didn't take the prison guards and make them prisoners. They brought in a whole new group of prisoners. And so they said to the former prisoners, you are now prison guards. And said, okay, act accordingly. And what they found was really interesting, because you would think that, okay, the people who were once prisoners, who are now prison guards, are going to be more empathetic to this new set of prisoners, because it's not people they're getting vengeance on. It's not the old prison guards. It's a new set of prisoners. These former prisoners understand what it's like to be prisoners, so they will be more sympathetic. The opposite was true, that they were in fact faster to start showing the problems, and to a greater degree that the people who had mistreated them had shown it, so that they were less empathetic and less compassionate, having been through it themselves. So what does this suggest? Something that I think we all already know, right? That when people are mistreated, they are not more likely to be more compassionate to others. They often become less likely to become compassionate to others. Probably more of that language of debt, right? Like the world has taken something from me, so now it's my turn to take something from it, right? So more of that kind of, almost like the way we were talking about money before. So look at this in terms of Elon Musk, right? So this is a guy who believes he deserves to be in the position that he's in. And that position is one of more power, and the world owing him more than it literally owes anyone else in the world by virtue of his money, right? And he deserves it from his perspective, because that's what our psychology tells us, and that we deserve to be in the inferior positions that we're in because we're not him. Because if we did deserve it, we'd be where he is, right? Well, he also is someone who has, especially when he had initially acquired Twitter, someone who went from being someone that a lot of people were like, oh, look at this awesome stuff that this guy's doing, to like, he's becoming increasingly unhinged, like he's being a bully out there, he's being nasty. Like, so people who had been fans of his, right, because he had been more kind of liberal leaning in some ways, a kind of moderate Democrat, started turning on him. Well, I think that has informed a lot of where he is right now. Why? Because of the Stanford prison experiment, where He is someone who knows what it's like to be bullied and made fun of online and so on and so forth. And that's caused him to become even increasingly more violent in dealing with other people, because instead of being like, well, I have a lot of power and therefore I have a lot of responsibility and I know what it's like to be bullied online and have people like kind of turn on me, so I want to be more sympathetic, he's become more violent in his engagement and kind of frolicking through the federal government, just destroying people's lives. And whatever your position on and whether or not they should be getting rid of US aid, which is literally the largest and most effective charity organization in the world that has a huge impact on causing the rest of the world and those countries to be kind of more sympathetic to us, more willing to work with us, and turn away from other countries like China and Russia because we're helping them out. Whatever you think about that, remember, there's a whole lot of people who work there. We're talking about thousands of people who work there who are now have just been told you're out of a job. Even if you're a conservative person, hear me when I say you are also concerned about just simply being told you're fired, right? So these people, they're not just coming out and saying, we do great work, blah, blah, blah. This is important philosophically. They're coming out and saying, I don't understand how I'm going to feed my family. This isn't just a matter of a demotion. This isn't just a matter of a pay decrease. Literally, we're out of work. We're having to completely, a lot of them were in other countries. We have to come, I have no work. I have to move back. What am I going to do? How do I feed my kids, right? And he does not care. Musk has just gone on Twitter, gone on X repeatedly, right? Just bragging about what he's doing as people are decimated in the back. And we keep hearing kind of a language of, well, you make an omelet, sometimes you got to break some eggs. That is not the language that you want to hear from the person with the most power in the country. That is not the language of a democracy, right? Because a democracy is where you get to say, no, this is too much egg breaking. We're the eggs. We're not doing this. We have no say in it. It wouldn't matter. Again, hear me. We, the people of the United States, a majority of us could say, we want this to stop. We don't like it anymore. And it would not matter. And it wouldn't matter to him. Okay, so those are my thoughts on what has led to Elon Musk acting as he does, right? This billions of dollars literally being something we can't acquire, positioning him such that the rest of the world owes him in terms of money being a language of debt, him having the ability to feel that power position is one that he must actually deserve, because that's kind of how our psychology works, even if we haven't done anything to earn it. Him feeling bullied has made him even less compassionate to the rest of the world and caused him to garner even more power, which causes this cycle. Now, not just a cycle of him believing that he deserves power, but I think now also a cycle of violence. He's gotten power, so he believes he deserves that power. That's cycling up and up and up and up. But also, he's getting vengeance, so he believes he deserves and has the right to gain more vengeance. Well, I've slashed this and I fired those people. They must deserve it, right? And so as he gains more vengeance against the people who he feels like has done him harm, against the society that he believes has made fun of him, he's going to believe that he had the right to do that because he succeeded. And so it's going to go on and on. What do you think? You disagree? Amazing. Put it in the comments. I'd love to respond. If you agree, please like, please subscribe, please comment. Did I miss something? What else can we add to this thought process? Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great day.